Welcome to A State of Mind, a podcast series all about motivating, inspiring, and educating you in the art of selling luxury real estate. This is Tammy Sims, trainer for the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. For this installation of our Blueprint series, we're going to talk about the importance of building your brand as a luxury real estate professional. Joining us today is Ricardo Rodriguez, Coldwell Banker Global Luxury Ambassador, who works in Boston, Massachusetts. First, a moment about our sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you in part by Real Marketing, the only marketing firm recommended exclusively by the Institute. Real Marketing utilizes over 25 years of expertise, and their products are built and customized for you to dominate any neighborhood, anywhere. Go to realmarketingforyou.com. That's real marketing, the number 4, you.com. Also, look for past A State of Mind episodes with CEO David Collins as our guest. Now, about that very special guest. Ricardo Rodriguez is one of 18 Coldwell Banker Global Luxury Ambassadors worldwide, a member of the prestigious International Luxury Alliance, recipient of numerous awards and recognitions from NAREP, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, and NAGLREP, the National Association of Gay and Lesbian Real Estate Professionals. He was named Coldwell Banker's #1 team in New England, Real Trends Wall Street Journal Top 100 Teams in the U.S., and Boston Magazine's Best of Boston. Ricardo regularly appears as a featured speaker in national and international conferences, as well as on local and national media. Ricardo, welcome to the podcast.
Tammy, thank you very much. That was quite the introduction. I'm embarrassed now.
Oh, well, I feel the same way sometimes when the reverse is true and I'm being introduced. But by way of introduction, let's let the audience get to know a little bit about you. Tell us about yourself. What was your journey? How long have you been a real estate professional?
So, as you mentioned earlier, I'm in the Boston market. I moved to Boston, oh my gosh, I think it's like 30 years ago right now. I'm originally from Colombia. In terms of that kind of like origin story, I came to my story is that the classic kind of like immigrant story. I came to the country with $25 in my pocket. I barely speak English now, and I did less then. I came to the country with all these dreams and aspirations, and no college degree and other stuff. And I found real estate around 18 years ago. So it's almost 2 decades. I found Coldwell Banker as my home. Then I've always been with the company. I've always been kind of like in this market, and it's been an extraordinary journey, both personally as well as professionally. And I wouldn't change anything for the world.
I feel the same way.
Right.
So you mentioned that you're in the Boston market.
Yes.
Tell us what kinds of properties you typically deal with. Single family homes, townhomes. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So Boston in general, like Boston metropolitan area, is primarily a condo market. And so I would say, again, I'm literally here guesstimating, but I would say it's going to be 80%, maybe higher than that, of our inventory comes in the form of condos. And then we have the remaining of that being single family. Obviously, it changes as we move out into suburban areas, but the core of Boston is primarily a condo market. I have a team called Ricardo Rodriguez and Associates. The team has been in place for, I think, 6-7 years at this point. We work in every single aspect of in every transaction, from general brokerage, from your basic, rental, all the way to your first-time home buyer, and to your luxury client, all the way to our developers. The majority of what we do, and I think what we know in terms of what we do in terms of niche, is in new construction and luxury, and intersection of those two. So I would say 75%, 80% of what we do really is in that general arena of new construction and luxury. But we work with every buyers, sellers, all price points, all types of properties.
Well, that's a good point. And I'm going to circle back to that in a little while. Let me ask, how do most of your clients come to you?
So I am a believer. I'm a real believer on the power of your sphere. I really do. I think that that sometimes we get very complicated in what we are doing, and and there's all these tools that are available out there, right? Everything from social media to post, you name it. We really have an arsenal of things that we could utilize in order to kind of like procure business. But I do think ultimately real estate, and this is actually something that I've heard many times, many top producers say is real estate, and I believe it. Real estate is all about answering your phone calls and shaking hands. It really is, and it's about that personal relationship. So as fancy as we could get, as wonderful as we think that we are, is ultimately going to be about your relationship to your sphere. And so, to answer your question, it's really about that. It's really, I have obviously we have thousands of names and contacts of people that we have worked with and touch base in a regular basis. But I would say the majority of our business really comes from, I would say, 250 people. That's a core of our business. And so when you're asking what we do is we treat those 250 or so people like they are the gods and goddesses that they actually are. And so it really is about continuing to enhance that relationship and continuing to enhance that personal touch in a regular basis. And that's really how we get it. I could tell you that I could literally, if I was to kind of like backtrack, I most likely I will narrow it down to 5 people out of those 250 or 300 people that we do, where the business has come, through the relationships, through the introductions. And so really, when I look at the resource allocation that we do in terms of marketing, I would say majority of what we spend in terms of market goes to that core set of people.
Sure. So staying in front of folks that already know you and like you and will refer you.
Absolutely. Listen, I talk to my agents all the time, right? I work with a lot of younger agents, and so there are other tools that they find really important too. And I always say, look, the people that love you are the ones that are going to give you the business when the market is good, but they're going to be the ones that take care of you when the market is not. And so pay attention to that. Who are those people? And it's not tools. Who are those people, actual people that are going to keep you in business, and pay attention to them and take care of them, because they'll take care of you.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. So if we want to go down the path of talking about building your personal luxury brand, so not everybody's going to pay attention, even the ones that love you the most, they're not always going to pay attention to every single touch that you're giving them, every single marketing piece, but there needs to be like a brand recognition. Mm-hmm. And so I want to ask you, as we start this conversation, how important is your personal brand independent of your brokerage?
Yes, of course. Yeah, listen, I do think that, as you know this, we practice this business for a long time. I'm sure people that are listening to this, some of them have been practicing longer than we have. Like I mentioned earlier, the business always goes back to you. It goes back to your relationships, and the business is built on you. I think that when I think about my relationship to Coldwell Banker, like for example, I love Coldwell Banker because in its home, and it provides all this incredible depth of tools and strategy that I can have at my disposal. But I know that ultimately the business is built around me and my value proposition. It's my ability to connect to people. I always, whenever I meet with like younger agents in particular, because I try to do as much mentoring as possible. And one of the questions is how does an agent like me that is new breaks into the luxury market? How do you get your first luxury listing? And I always answer, look, you get your first listing, not just your luxury listing, or you get your first stakes on this business by having a genuine connection to that person, to that audience. And so kind of like to answer your question, that personal brand has to revolve around you organically. It has to revolve around your origin story. It has to revolve around the things that make you who you are. For me, there's things that are very obvious, right? And my accent, my skin color, my story, the things that I love, my love for design, my love for architecture, all those things become part of who I am. They're all part of what I bring to the table. And those are the things that allow me to really create those connections. And those are the things that allow me to build that value proposition. I think that sometimes we get lost on this idea of a personal brand, and we think that it is about the video and the photo. Those are just components those are just little tools. your brand really is your value. What is it that you bring to the table that allows you to be different from everybody else? It's a question that I ask all the agents that join my team. I said, who are you to your audience? Who are you? What is it what makes you think that you're going to be able to compete with me, that I've been doing this for 20 years and I've done this much stuff? It doesn't mean that I'm going to get every piece of business, but if it was just by the size of your portfolio, most likely you wouldn't have a chance. But you do because you have the responsibility of creating your own value, but your value proposition, and you have to articulate that value proposition to your potential client base and to your current client base. And that's really how you build it. Your brand is that. Your brand is you. Your brand is what you bring to the table. And then what you do is you find the tools that are the better tools to communicate the value proposition to your audience. And so you said it, not all those 250 people are paying attention to what I am doing. And so how do I enhance that? How do I grow that list? How do I change that list? How do I create flexibility within that list? And it's by utilizing all those tools. But ultimately, it is about the kind of like organic, really core value of the proposition that I bring to the team. Do I make any sense?
Yes. And I love it because so many of our members, of the folks that are coming to take our course for the first time, they're so intimidated by how to develop their personal luxury brand. And I love what you said, that it's about identifying your core values. Who are you? What's your story? What makes you unique? And then combine that with all of the tools at your disposal. But ultimately, it comes down to really kind of your soul, right? Who are you?
Yeah. There is this use right now of this word authentic, which I think it makes sense, but I think is maybe overused. I prefer to use the word real. I think that when you come really real into this business, people connect with you. I always tell this story about how my listing presentations, I don't bring anything. My listing presentation, obviously I prepare, but my listing presentation is a conversation because I'm more interested in connecting with the person than giving a bunch of numbers that they already know, by the way. And so it is about that connection, and particularly in the luxury market segment, when we're dealing with a set of clients that are, they're seasoned clients. For the most part, they've sold and bought homes who knows how many times before you met them, right? Yeah. Or they've been buying and selling homes with you for who knows how long, or their parents did, and they grew up with that stuff. And so they have an experience in real estate that they know what they want. And so when you come in when you come in with this realness to the table, and when you are there kind of like offering yourself as a way of them understanding what your value proposition is, but also as a way of connecting, I think that becomes a very kind of like important way of continuing to build your business. And I think it's very particular. But it applies to all market segments, but I do think it's very important, particular to the luxury market segment.
Sure.
To connect.
Now, do you think that it's important to really kind of evaluate who the competition is and figure out how you are different?
Yes, of course. Listen, if you don't know, who your competition is, and you don't know how they do it, then how do you create, a value for yourself, and how do you create a point of differentiation? The thing about real estate is, when you think about it, we all do the same things. We'll do the same from A to Z. We know it's not a linear thing. We don't go A, B, C, D. We go from A to F, back to B, to Z. You know what I mean? Like, it's all over the place. But ultimately, we do the same things, and the arsenal of tools that we have at our disposition are pretty much the same. It's a very uniform thing. That's what allows somebody like me to break into a market, and you to break into your markets, because we have kind of like what is the word? Universality? I don't know. A universal nature to what we are doing, right? But I do think that it is what creates the advantage is your ability to have that point of differentiation. That really is what makes a difference.
Now, there's also that connection and the ability to tie into your brokerage support. And our audience is going to be made up of real estate professionals with lots of different brands, some of them large, well-known brands, some of them independents. We probably have a lot of broker owners on the call listening to us. And so I want to ask you about how you leverage
Yes.
being a Coldwell Banker luxury ambassador, but kind of in a global sense of how you leverage the tools of your brokerage, the strength of your brokerage, whether it be a big, well-known name or whether it be a boutique independent.
Yeah, well, I do think that the first step on that is to really realize that your current broker is your home. That current brokerage is your home. Because I think that when you have that sense, I think it's a matter of culture, right? I think that regardless of whether a company is large or whether a company is a small company, it's always going to be about the culture. And if it's a culture that actually is kind of like, supporting your process, then you're in the right place. So I think I would say first identify if that company is home. I think in the past few years, 10 years has been this shift on the general culture of real estate, in which agents are just moving from one company to the other one and looking for the different split and for the signing bonus and all this stuff. And then it's like, well, and that's fine. If that works for you, that works. For me, I think the most important thing is really to find that sense of home. That's why I've never left Coldwell Banker, because Coldwell Banker to me is home. And so that's number one. I believe in the culture of the company. And then number two, it has to do with the vision of your business. For me, when I look at the luxury market segment, obviously it requires local expertise. And that's what I bring to the table, is my local expertise and my local knowledge of how this specific market segment operates. But the luxury market segment, more than any other market segment, is a global business. It's really fueled not only by your local buyers and sellers, but it's really fueled by your feeder markets, and it's really fueled by that relationship between your market and understanding what that relationship between your market and those feeder markets it's all about. And so when I think of Coldwell Banker, I think of the strength, the international strength of that company. The fact that that I was asked to be a global luxury ambassador is a tremendous honor for me, because it's only 18 or 20 of us around the world. And so I take that very seriously. But I also do truly believe on that global nature of the company and that ability for me to establish relationships beyond my market, and like real relationships with agents that also understand how I do the business, and they do it at the same level or sometimes even better. And so I know that for me, for example, in Boston, markets like San Francisco, like LA, like Miami, New York, right? And internationally, markets like London, like Paris, are really important markets, because our clients are really kind of like going back and forth between those. And so for me, being able to establish a relationship with somebody like Jade Mills in LA, right? Or the Jill Zetter Group in Miami, or Laurent Demure in Paris, it's important. It's not just a simple relationship, but to me, it's really the ability to provide continuity for my clients. And so no matter where they are, they're being provided a level of service that equals or surpasses what I do for them in my local market.
And I love how that ties back into your personal brand, right? Your brokerage has to have the right fit, the same core values.
Yes.
And I have to chuckle about the movement of agents. I have had 6 recruiting calls myself today. So it's definitely hot and heavy right now.
On that, I think if that works for you, that works for you. And you were asking me the question, and to me, that is more important than anything else. The culture, what I'm creating,
Absolutely. And I'm incredibly happy with the culture where I am. So I just have to chuckle at all the calls that I'm getting, trying to make me move. And I know that's true for so many of our members. And a lot of our members question, they ask, should I make a move to a different brokerage that has a different presence in the luxury brand? And I think that you really hit the nail on the head, that it's less about that and more about whether the culture and the core values match your own, and that becomes part of the brand.
And I think that you build a business for your client. I think sometimes we build, and I see it, right? Like, and I've been there, by the way. It's not that I see it, that I've been there, in which sometimes you make decisions that are based on what you think should be happening, and not necessarily what your client direction is. And I think I've learned, particularly past few years that really, if I want to grow, I have to pay attention to what my clients are saying, and I got to pay attention to what my clients want. Certainly, that long term kind of like strategy has to be belongs to me, and is the direction of my own personal business. But I think that ultimately, I have learned that I have to listen to my clients, and so I don't think I mentioned this to you, Tammy, before. I literally expanded into Rhode Island 2 months ago, and 3 months ago. And the reason why I expanded into Rhode Island is because my clients are like, they're looking for projects in Providence. They have summer homes in Newport, right? And there is this relationship between Boston and Rhode Island that made sense for me to expand both on the new construction as well as on the luxury market segment part of my business. And so I do, I really do believe that as much as we want to have that strategy for growth, at the same time, that strategy needs to be an organic strategy that represents where our clients are going and what our clients want. Again, those relationships with, let's say, with those agents that I mentioned earlier, those are not vacuous relationships. Those are actually really important personal and business relationships, and they go beyond the business. They're real friendships. But it allowed me to really, again, provide a level of uniformity on my business that is elevated across, no matter where my clients are going.
Sure. Now, I think that also could translate to perhaps the value in your brand of being part of the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing.
Absolutely.
Do you leverage that in your branding and in your client interface?
Listen, absolutely. Again, it's talk about a resource, right? Talk about a brain trust. To have something like the institute in Cobo Banco, we have a Global Luxury, the program, the one that I'm an ambassador to, and Global Luxury is very tightly related. Has a strong relationship to the institute, and so when I think about the level of like brain trust and expertise that is pulled together, right, and that is at our disposition. Being member of the institute and being part of the Global Luxury program to me are the basics of being a luxury agent, and are part of strong parts of that definition of me as a luxury agent.
Perfect. And then I also want you to tell us about the International Luxury Alliance.
Yes. So the International Luxury Alliance is an extraordinary group. It's a group that includes agents from 3-4 different companies. And these are agents that excel in their markets on their performance around the luxury market segment. And it's a think tank. It really is a think tank. And so we meet now a couple of times a year. I think it's like 65, 70, something like that, agents. And they're from markets primarily in the United States, but also international markets. And it provides us the opportunity to, again, meet twice a year in different cities, visit each other, and then not only share kind of like our market, local market knowledge so that we understand what's happening around the world, but also it allows us to really speak, kind of like face to face with people that are like-minded in the way in which we see the work that we do around luxury. And so it is I got to tell you, it's the best thing that ever happened to me in terms of my business, is that, that invitation to the International Luxury Alliance, because it's really, I met some of my best friends right now. And then also some of the most extraordinary colleagues are part of that group. And so it's been business changing, life changing. It's wonderful.
So something that I'm taking away from this is really when you start thinking about your luxury brand as a real estate professional, you're so often thinking that forward-facing client, prospective client avenue. But what you've been describing is really part of your brand is communicating that to other real estate professionals around the country, around the world. And that is a really important part of branding. So I'm glad that you took us down that path. But I want to circle us back a little bit to the forward facing and ask you about how important your community involvement is, philanthropy. Tell us about what you're involved in, what you find passionate, and how that works into your overall brand.
Listen, philanthropy to me, it goes, it's not just a must do, but it's a way of just being grateful for the opportunities, right? And there are so many causes out there that are worthy. The way that I look at it is that I look at the stuff that is close to my heart. And so here, for me, again, I come from a kind of like an arts background. So for me, things like the arts are very important. Equality issues are also tremendously important to me. And then food insecurities as well as housing insecurities are kind of like important to me. And so I try to, again, in the past 2 years, I actually we put a good amount of resources into COVID vaccine research. And so to me, it is, listen, if our community is not well, if we are not helping take care of the community, then how do we go back to not only as human beings, like show face, but how do we continue to build a business? If the community is not in good place, it's not only like an ethical human thing that we need to do, take care of that, but it's also in some ways a good business decision. Because if the community is well, then our business is, we're part of the community. And so if the community is well, then our business continues to thrive and to grow. So I think there is a need for that. And certainly there are different ways of doing it. Sometimes it's resources like money, but sometimes it's time. And so depending on where you are in your career and in your abilities, I think it's important just to give back. Plus it keeps you humble. It keeps you connected to the world. It keeps you connected to the things that are really important. Sometimes we get so suck it up in what we are doing, and particularly when you work on an area like the luxury market segment, your world is very specific, and then I think you start losing connection to what really is important, and to those places where there is opportunity to give back. And so philanthropy, giving back, I think is an important core decision. Plus, you will find that a lot of our clients on that market segment are also very, very philanthropic. And so, it's part of, again, it's a part of being, a thoughtful human being, but I think it's also part of connecting to people in a different way.
Right. Being visible and staying top of mind.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Now, that brings me to a question that goes back to your comment earlier about working in a variety of price points with a variety of different types of individuals. One of the questions that we get most often is from agents who are concerned that if they pursue a luxury clientele and refine their branding such that their messaging is resonating more with a more affluent clientele, that they run the risk of alienating the moderate price point clients who don't think that their property is expensive enough. How do you manage that in your brand, in your business model?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're saying. I think for me has been a decision around the fact of identifying the luxury not as a price point, but luxury as an experience. And so what we offer, so we're luxury agents, not because we're only dealing with expensive properties, but we're luxury agents because we're providing the highest level of service, regardless of that price point. Certainly when you're working on more expensive homes, there's a very different kind of like depth to what we are doing in terms of marketing. But experientially, whether you are buying your first, one bedroom home, or you're buying your gigantic, penthouse somewhere, the level of service and the way in which approach our clients is uniform. It's uniform and it's consistent. And so I think it is luxury is an experience to me. And so we provide that experience regardless of price point. And I think that when we started understanding that very clearly, a lot of that kind of like pushback that we were getting, because it comes from both, it comes from both. And we would hear sometimes from people that had, that had luxury listings that would say, "Oh my God, no, we think you're even too fancy for us." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. Your house is a gorgeous single family home, an $11 million home. How could I be two fans? And then you will have also, the pushback from people who thought like, you don't have the time for my listing, or you don't have the time for my home search. And so really just for us was, and for me was just understanding that luxury has nothing to do with price point, but really has to do with how, the experience that we provide to our clients. Because luxury, when you think about it, luxury is very subjective,
It is.
Just because something is expensive doesn't mean that it's luxurious. And just because something is not expensive doesn't mean that it is not. And so you have that subjectivity to it. And so when you take away the price tag out of that, and when you focus on the experience, you have that ability, I think, that to connect. And make sense?
It does. I think it's brilliant, right? And I believe that that's possibly the nicest package that I have heard a response to that question from. And so I hope you don't mind that I'm gonna use that in my training.
No,
right?
Because I say something smart for crying out.
It's perfect. Time flies. And as we wrap up our time together, I want to give you an open-ended question. Maybe something that you learned later on that you wish you knew right up front. But what kind of words of wisdom would you give to our audience, the listeners who are looking to increase their position in the luxury real estate market, or take their business to the next level from that service perspective?
My God, I have more than one word. And let me say, I'm trying to make it, as you have discovered, Tammy, I talk a lot. So I would say the first one is don't be afraid of it, right? Don't become the obstacle to your growth. Sometimes we feel like we don't be like, look at me, right? I'm the least likely luxury agent. If you just look at where I come from, right? I don't come from that world. I have no history of relationship to that world, but I have learned I have learned what it means, and I have learned what it means to my clients. And so I learned that I cannot be afraid, that I cannot make myself the obstacle to my growth because I am uncomfortable, or because I think that I don't know what's going on, or because I think that I'm going to be judged. That stuff has to go. That kind of like mind frame, that has to go. You have to be fearless. And I think that when you look at those very top luxury agents around the world, they're all, one of the characteristics are they're kind, they're pretty smart, and they're very humble, and they're fearless. Really, really, really fearless. And so that would be one thing that I wish I would have learned this, earlier than I did. And the second one is don't be, again, on that line of not being afraid, but more like encourage yourself to be yourself as you come to the table.
Because that's wonderful.
That is what gives you the edge. That really is what gives you the edge. Like, don't pay attention to what is said about you or what you think is being said about you. Like, really be unapologetic as to who you are, because we all have a genesis. We all come from somewhere. We all have something. We all have stories. We all have backgrounds, all of that stuff. Nobody's coming here, purely, covering gold. We're all coming with something. And so be unapologetic about who you are, because that should become part of your story. And right. That should become part of how you connect. And as I said earlier, Tammy, in the luxury market segment, that client really values that. They value the realness. That's right. They value your being present.
That's right. And that absolutely wraps up your brand is that true. I don't want to say authentic, because as you mentioned, that's overused these days, but it's about who you are. And so I'm so grateful for your spending time with us to share with our listeners a little bit that hopefully will help them on their way.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. I hope this is helpful to somebody, even if it's one person.
I'm certain that it is. Thank you all so much for joining us on this episode of A State of Mind, the art of selling luxury real estate. If you're interested in learning more about the Institute, you can find more at luxuryhomemarketing.com. If you like what you just heard, please share with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.